And welcome. All right, everybody. Welcome to our lobby day training. Thanks so much for being here. I am going to be one of your MCs for the night. My name is Raquel Ortega. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a senior organizer at the ACLU of Northern California. Next slide.
Hi, everyone, and my name is Gabriela Rojas. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a senior organizer with ACLU of Southern California, based in Los Angeles County, LA in the house, and I'm really happy to be here with everyone today.
Awesome. Wow, I am so excited to be chatting with you all today and so excited to be giving today's land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that all land in what is currently known as the United States is unceded Indigenous territory, and that California is the occupied land of over 100 tribes. We recognize the painful history upon which the state of California exists, including state-sanctioned and state-funded genocide, displacement and dispossession of ancestral lands, removal of children from their families, and laws that seek to erase Indigenous peoples altogether. A good place to start learning more about Indigenous land and the land that you're on is by visiting native-land.ca. I say it's a good place to start because maps like this are often just a snapshot of a particular time and place. Indigenous peoples have existed for thousands of years and have moved and shifted, so even maps like these can't capture the full complexities of Indigenous history and land. But like I said, it's a good place to start. Going into these lobby visits, I feel so grateful to be able to spend time in place together. We have people coming from all different backgrounds, walks of life, and geographical locations in order to unite for a common cause, to advocate for our communities and for ourselves. Yes, we get to meet elected officials and talk about some pretty important issues, but the process leading up to that is pretty special. I saw in the chat, Christy, you mentioned being a lobbying newbie. Welcome. The good news is that you aren't doing this alone. We get to share intergenerational wisdom, intergenerational culture with one another, and weave together storytelling with political analysis. We're going to spend our time together today, bringing in some powerful voices and doing some pretty deep dives into the bills. I'd love for us to set an intention today as you hear people's stories and learn about these issues. Think about, how does this relate to your life and the lives of your community? How has your lived experience impacted how you view these issues? And how are you going to prepare to tell your story during this time together? Thanks. Next slide.
Thank you so much for that, Raquel. We're very excited today as we're just a few days away from Lobby Day, and we're really looking forward to gathering again after being virtual for so long. So tonight we're bringing you a training on legislative advocacy from our own guru, Carmen Nicole Cox. Then some of our brilliant advocacy staff from across the state will give us the latest on our sponsored Lobby Day bills, including Assembly Bill 742, 793, ACA 10, and AB 920, and finally SB 852. And then finally, we'll do some final prep and share some last minute helpful resources so we can be ready to go for Monday. And with that, I'll hand it back to Raquel.
Awesome. So we have a lot to cover today. And to ensure that we get through everything, I'd like to ask you, if any questions come up, please type them into the chat. That way we have time saved at the end. So we'll be gathering those, collecting them, and have them all there, have them in one place when we get to the Q&A. Thanks so much for that. Next slide. One more slide. Thank you. Okay, so our first speaker today is Carmen Nicole Cox. She's the Director of Government Affairs from ACLU California Action, which is our legislative team based in Sacramento. Carmen, who uses she, her pronouns, is a self-described liberation attorney motivated to fight for poverty alleviation and decarceration based on her experiences with loved ones being forced in the carceral system, including probation and so-called diversion programs. So Carmen is going to give us a crash course on how the legislature works, the life cycle of a bill, and our lobby visit goals. Thanks so much for joining us, Carmen. I'll hand it over to you to add anything to your introduction and get us started.
Thank you very much, Raquel. Greetings, everyone. I am waving to you, even though that's weird. So yes, I Director of Government Affairs here at ACLU Cal Action. We are the lobbying arm for all of the affiliates here in California. So super excited, honored, honestly, to be here with you all. I am going to try and keep it brief. It is not my strong suit, but I have my orders. So, Ermelinda, may I have the next slide, please? So over the next 10 minutes, we're essentially going to be talking about, so what happens next? But to get to the point of, so what happens next with the bills, we're going to start first by just a foundational explanation of like, who are these people that are getting to introduce and move bills that ultimately become the rules that we're all expected to live by. And so that is the brief way to say that is like, here's how the legislature works. To start, I will say, each of us has 2 representatives. We all have a state assembly member and a state senator. There are 40 state senators, and they on average represent about 1 million or so. Yeah, they represent about 1 million people. We're roughly 40 million folks here in California. Our legislator or assembly members, there are 80 of those folks, and they represent about half of the number of people as the senators. And I will tell you, the ultimate goal for every piece of legislation, for most legislation, is that you have to get a majority of votes. So that means if we're talking about senators, we're trying to get 21 votes. 21 sounds like an easy number, but it's rough, which is why you all are so important. And if you're in the assembly, you're trying to get 41 votes. On average, that's about the end goal. If we could go to the next slide, we'll talk about how do we actually get there. Okay, so in order to a lot of times their staff, that's right, I'm already digging this chat. I like it. So our legislators are essentially responsible for representing us. They are supposed to be protecting our interests, advancing our interests, outreaching to us to learn what are our interests, reaching out to make sure that we actually understand, or that they understand what it is we identify as a problem, so that when they are crafting solutions, those solutions will actually leave us better off. They will actually address the problem. So that is what they're actually responsible for. The way they do that is they introduce bills, they debate the bills, they do that in the policy committees, we'll talk about that. They do it on the floor, we'll talk about that. And they vote on bills. And while they may not necessarily have a filibuster system, they certainly have a system whereby sometimes they vote in blocks, so they vote together. They also, when they don't pass bills by voting in blocks or voting their conscience or however they vote, aye, that is up. If they don't pass bills, then they're killing bills. That means they're voting no. And, you know, they vote together in a lot of occasions. So one of the things we know here is that bills are first debated in the committees, And those committees are twofold, which we'll talk about. First, they'll vote in committees. If they make it out of the committees, the smaller groups, then they will get to the floor, and the larger body, so like the entire Senate or the entire Assembly, will vote on a bill. And that's sort of the short explanation of the life cycle of a bill. But what I want to make clear to you all is they're responsible for responding to us. That is their responsibility, which means we can give them the ideas for the bills that they draft and introduce and debate and vote on. May I have the next slide, please? How a bill becomes a law. There was that one, I'm not going to tell stories. So if a bill is introduced in the Assembly, then that means it has to move through committees in the Assembly in order to get to the floor of the Assembly and ultimately be voted out of the Assembly over to the second house, which in that case would be the Senate. I'm just going to stop here and note that when bills die in committee, it is not always the end, right? And I only say that because if you are advocating for something and it feels like it has reached its death, it may not have. And even if it did, your advocacy is not for nothing, because a lot of the advocacy that we do is not just about getting the ultimate kill the bill or pass the bill. It's about having the conversation, planting the seeds, giving people new vocabulary, right? It's trying to change hearts and minds. May I have the next slide, please? So if a bill starts in the Senate, same as in the Assembly, it'll go first to a policy committee. In the policy committees, y'all, that's where the members, anywhere from about 5, 8, I think that might be the largest I've seen so far in the policy committees. What they're talking about there is this good policy? Is this a good idea? That's what the policy committees are saying. Is it a good idea? Is it going to hurt more people than it helps? Is it actually going to help anybody? Does it make sense? Is it clear? Is it solving an actual problem? That is how the bill is debated and thought about in the policy committees, right? And then I'm going to talk about it here because it makes sense. Once it leaves a policy committee, it'll go to a money committee. In the money committee, they're saying, okay, so it's a good idea. It's going to help people, but is it worth it? Is it worth the dollars and cents that it's actually going to cost? That is a question that gets debated as the bill moves through. And if it makes it out of the money committee, it'll go to the floor, where again, we will remember, in most cases, we're trying to get 21 votes in the Senate because that's the majority. May I have the next slide, please? So let's say the bill makes it out of the policy committee. This is a great idea. And then it also makes it out of the money committee. Not only is it a great idea, but the benefit is worth the cost, right? The benefit outweighs the cost. So then it'll have gotten to the floor, and the floor it gets a majority vote if that's what it needs. Sometimes it needs 2/3, but we'll stick with a majority for now. Gets a majority vote, does the same thing in the next house, right? Which is, we talked about the Assembly, and then we went to the Senate. Then it's going to go to the governor's desk. And the way our system is set up, after all of that fighting and debating and adding and subtracting and multiplying, all that advocacy, the governor gets to say, idea, I'll sign it. Or the governor will say, this is not a good idea. Y'all see how I was going to say that and I didn't say that? It's not a good idea for whatever reason the governor might come up with, and the governor can veto the bill. Still, again, I'm just going to say our advocacy is not for nothing. If we are not standing for something, we're falling for and allowing anything, and we will live to fight another day. But that's the governor's role. The governor literally gets to veto or sign bills. There's conversation here, or there's a note here about how the legislature can override. That is true. It doesn't happen too frequently, but it is definitely possible that if the governor vetoes a bill, then it'll go back to the legislature, and the legislature as a whole, if 2/3 of the legislature votes in favor, can override, and the bill, the legislation, will become law, notwithstanding the fact that the governor didn't like it. I think that's what I want to say there. I want to say that lobby day, we're going to be lobbying the legislators. When bills make it to the governor's desk, whether we like it or not, we can also lobby the governor. So I just want to highlight that. You can email this cat, like we elected him or didn't, but he's in and he serves us, right? And so if anything ever gets to the governor and you want to weigh in on it, whether to say, please sign this or don't sign that, just want to highlight that that is something you can absolutely do. May I have the next slide, please? Oh yeah, this is just another opportunity to say, like, the legislators work for us, y'all. Like, quite honestly, and I know that this happens because sometimes I see these bills and I'm like, whose idea with it is this? Quite honestly, any one of us can come up with a bill idea, take it to an elected official, and they can introduce that bill as law or as legislation, right? And we should, and as you all know, ACLU does do that. And those are the bills that you all will be lobbying on this coming Monday, because the legislators work for us. We can give them the bill ideas. We can help them develop the research they need. We can help them connect with their constituents so that they can learn what their constituents think about legislation they have introduced. And quite plainly, we can work really hard to influence the decisions that happen in our state capitol. There's a note here to tell you that you can research your legislator. My favorite link is findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov. I don't know, do I have one more slide? I think I might be done. Oh, lobby visit goes. Hey, y'all, we are there to let them know that they work for us. We're going to do it with professionalism, but we're going to do it with passion. We're going to let them know, like, we are here because we elected you, and we want you to do what serves our interests, what leaves our families and our neighbors better off, not just tomorrow, not just for the next election, but for generations to come. So that's the goal of our lobby visits. Quite plainly, the members need to hear from us. They need to know that you're paying attention. They need to know that if they don't do what you need them to do, another election is coming and things could go differently. So I want to thank y'all for signing up to do this work. Let's get out there on Monday. Y'all, we got 5 dope bills. Let's get them passed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Carmen. And I saw lots of great knowledge and questions being shared in the chat, and we'll circle back to those at the end. And we look forward to hearing from you when we gather in Sacramento again. So now I am very honored to be able to introduce to you 2 amazing ACLU volunteers. Our work is people powered, and community advocates are the heart and soul of what we do. So now I would like to introduce just 2 of our amazing volunteer leaders. There's others here in the chat. First is Jasmine Young, who is a volunteer precinct captain with ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. And she'll be followed by Michelle Pereda, who has been an amazing volunteer and served as a lobby captain in past lobby days with ACLU of Southern California. I will turn it over to Jasmine first to share a little bit about her experience as a volunteer.
Thank you, and thank you, Carmen, for that amazing presentation. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine, and I am a precinct captain / volunteer at the San Diego and Imperial Counties chapter. And so I am so excited to be here and to be participating in these lobby visits. This year, I've been volunteering at the ACLU in San Diego since 2019. And it honestly has been so beneficial in my own advocacy journey. I've always known that I wanted to be an activist and an advocate since I was in middle school, and I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I was going to find a way to. And it's really based around a quote that I aspire to, and this advocate who stated it is Fannie Lou Hamer, and she stated that nobody's free until everybody's free. And so I really do live by that quote and her values that she represented. And it's really based on creating systems of care that are no longer harmful to our most vulnerable communities. And so that's why I advocate for policies that really do center care. And so I am just so happy to be involved in this lobbying visit. And I really hope that y'all take advantage of this opportunity, as well as lobbying is a form to hold our representatives accountable, whether you voted for them or whether you didn't. It's a space where you have the power to tell them what you need and what your communities deserve. So yeah, so that's all I have to say. But I really hope that we all just tune into that power and really let them know what we want. So I'll pass it to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you for unmuting me. I'm really happy and excited to join everyone. My name is Michelle Pereda. I grew up in the Inland Empire in the Corona Norco area, and I moved to LA in my early 20s, just in search of a more progressive, space that I could exist. And now I'm back in the Inland Empire, trying to push for some progressive ideas out here. I've been working with the immigrant community for 13 years on an individual basis, and I started volunteering with the ACLU in 2020. And at that time, we were doing all of our lobby visits virtually, which is a really great experience, but I'm very, very excited to be joining everyone in person and finally meeting all these amazing advocates in person, so many of you that I've met virtually, and so I'm very excited for that. But what lobbying means for me is a way to really amplify our voices. As working with individuals in the immigration system for a very long time, it feels great to help them on an individual level, but lobbying empowers us to create change for everybody. So I really love that lobbying, by lobbying, I'm not just helping, one person at a time, but really able to affect change for large groups of people. And so that's what it has meant for me, and just being here and sharing space with so many like-minded individuals has been very exciting, and I look forward to meeting you all soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, Jasmine and Michelle. I really appreciate y'all so much. And I loved all the love in the chat from everybody. Thank you so much. Keep it up. So now we're going to move into our bill training, where we'll cover some of the bigger details of the bills that we're going to talk about on Monday. We'll first start by talking about our assembly bills. Pop quiz, can you tell me how you can find out who your assembly member is? Type it into the chat. Next slide. So the first bill we're going to be talking about is AB 742 by Jackson, and it's about ending canine force. Next slide. Thank you. So our next speaker is Lizzie. You can thank you so much for joining. Lizzie uses she, her pronouns, is a policy consultant, former ACLU staff, and just all around political baddie. She's a criminal justice advocate who has worked extensively with incarcerated people at San Quentin, teaching journalism and college biology. Lizzie was also instrumental in getting California's policy decertification bill passed last year with us. It's truly an honor to have you join us, working with us today. Really good to see you. So Lizzie, what can you tell us about AB 742?
Thank you so much, Raquel, and I'm so happy to be here and talking to all of you, and so appreciative and grateful for you all for doing this work and this advocacy. So AB 742 was by Assembly Member Jackson, and so the bill will end an extremely brutal and also completely unnecessary police practice. It prohibits the use of police canines for biting or crowd control, and restricts their use for arrest and apprehension. Police canines, as some may know, have a very sordid past in our country's history of violent oppression, particularly of Black Americans. They originated with slave patrols. They were used to brutally disrupt protests during the civil rights movement. In more recent decades, the LAPD used to openly refer to Black people as dog biscuits. And in 2013, a report of the LA Sheriff's Department found that 100% of everyone bitten by the department's canines were Black or Latino. Statewide, even the most recent data we have, which is 2020 to 2021, show that canine units severely injured or killed more than 180 people. 2/3 were people of color, and 2/3 of them were unarmed. Now, when a police dog bites you, so I'm trying to, I think next slide. Okay, sorry, what I'm saying is not necessarily coordinated with the slides, I apologize. So the one thing I wanna share is that when a police dog bites you, it is not an ordinary dog bite. Police canines are bred and trained so that their bite is far more severe than a normal dog bite. People have compared their bites to being attacked by a shark or run over by a car. People are permanently disfigured. When a police canine bites you, you are going to the hospital. And not only do police canines attack unarmed people, they also they maul people who are surrendering, people who are handcuffed, people who do not pose any threat whatsoever, including young children. They maul the bodies of people who have already been killed by the police, and people asleep in their own homes. And I apologize for the graphic nature of these descriptions, but it is very, it's just horrendous what these canines do to people. And all of this, and they don't serve a legitimate public safety interest. We hear a lot from police that if we can't use our canines, we're going to shoot more people. And this just isn't borne out by the data. Agencies that don't use police canines, and there are many of them, they do not shoot more people. When an agency that does use canines, that uses attack canines, when they stop or reduce their canine program, they do not shoot more people as a result. So the data just don't show that if you stop canine attacks, you're going to shoot more people. However, there are examples of canine attacks leading to shootings, where an officer will send a canine in to attack someone, and when that person is defending themselves, they're in agony, they're terrified, they instinctively try to get the dog off of them or defend themselves. Police have shot and killed people for doing that, for resisting. I cannot emphasize how brutal this practice is. And just more generally, they escalate situations. They turn situations that could have been resolved without any force into a situation where at least one person will need to go to the hospital. So AB 742 would take a very significant step here in prohibiting canines from biting people, prohibiting them from being used for crowd control where they're terrified and intimidate people, and restrict their use for arrest and apprehension. And we're really excited to be running AB 742 this year. It's going to be a tough one. It's facing a ton of opposition from law enforcement and from some cities and counties. But we also have a ton of support from community groups, from civil rights organizations, racial justice organizations, from all over California and across the country as well. So those are the main things I wanted to convey about the bill. Again, I really appreciate everyone working on this next week. We need all the help we can get. And I haven't, I'll check on the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much for that, Lizzie. Can we move the slides forward, please? Great, thank you. Yeah, that was such important information and historical background. The devastating impact of police canines is something I didn't know too much about myself, so I really appreciate that knowledge. And now I'm feeling really fired up to support AB 742. So next, my colleague Jose Quesada will join us to talk about Assembly Bill 793 by Assemblymember Mia Bonta to stop reverse warrants. As Power Building and Legislative Operations Associate at ACLU California Action, Jose is someone I know all of us rely on when it comes to our legislative advocacy. So Jose, please tell us what we need to know about AB 793.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. First, I'm gonna start off with saying I'm a very fast talker in person, and without faces facing me, I'm probably gonna be a little faster, so feel free to tell me to slow down in the chat. But yeah, I'm going to be going over Assembly Bill 793 by Assemblymember Mia Bonta, an act that seeks to stop reverse warrants. So in this presentation, I'm going to be going over what reverse warrants are and the impact that they have. So these so-called reverse warrants or reverse demands, geofencing demands, or keyword demands are a form of unconstitutional digital surveillance that pose an especially grave risk in a post-Roe America. These are not normal warrants, by the way. Whereas normal warrants are required or require the police to at least come up with probable cause before they investigate an individual, they don't have to do that in this case. Reverse warrants have been used to track the location and identity of people protesting police violence. And it easily could be used to track the location and identities of people visiting reproductive health clinics as well. Carrying a smartphone, logging into social media, using a location on your application gives a lot of information, and it gives a lot of information away, but it's part of our daily practices. And sorry, our digital trail reveals so much about us, and it's something that really must be safeguarded. Especially when considering the rights and safety of people seeking reproductive and gender-affirming care. Right now, people who need this care find themselves newly faced with the digital surveillance apparatus that could be used against them due to changing politics across the country. California has recognized this, but we must do so much more to fully protect vulnerable people seeking healthcare from digital tracking. And just to go over some examples of what these are, there's two types that I want to go over. There's a reverse location warrant. And what this does, it allows law enforcement to draw a parameter around a certain area. So think of a Planned Parenthood clinic or a gender affirming care physician's office. And anyone who crosses this parameter, a law enforcement could identify who they are based on the hours of operations of these clinics. The other type that I want to go over is a reverse keyword warrant. And this is a situation where an officer could ask Google for the name of everyone who searched particular keywords. So for example, if someone Googles transgender woman hormones, that could be the keywords that are sought after, and Google will then do a search of all of their users who did that and provide that over to law enforcement. The same can be said for people who look for access to the prescription drug mifepristone. So this is a very frightening use of reverse warrants that this bill aims to fix. These reverse demands turn due process on its head. They can compel companies to search the records and reveal the identities of all the people who look up these keywords. They could also be very specific on the location and find people who are driving down a certain street and pinpoint it within the exit of an on-ramp or off-ramp, as well as a particular street. California-based companies are receiving more of these demands. And it's important to note that these demands will only rise as more states seek to criminalize abortions and gender-affirming care. Another thing that's worth mentioning here is a single request can cover thousands of people in one sweep. People in California have a fundamental, inalienable right and constitutional right to privacy with respect to personal reproductive decisions and digital privacy. Reverse demands can also chill the exercise of freedom of speech, association, religion, assembly, movement, and the press. And just to reiterate, they could easily be used to request the names and identities of people whose digital trails show that they have visited California healthcare providers or search relevant keywords. Can you please go to the next slide? So the solution, AB 793 aims to make California a true refuge for people seeking or providing abortion and gender-affirming care. And the way to do that is that we must take these overbroad and likely unconstitutional reverse demands completely off the table. AB 793 stops government entities from even requesting. It also stops courts from issuing them. And it also ensures strong enforcement to protect our privacy rights. If we could go to the next slide, please. One thing that I am excited to share with you all here is that AB 793 has passed its first Assembly Committee, which was the Assembly Public Safety Committee, with bipartisan support. And that was very exciting for us, and I'm just glad to share that. As well, the bill now is in the Assembly Judiciary Committee, and this bill is supported by over 50 organizations. That is not to say that it's not going to be an easy lift, so I'm very appreciative of all you here who are going to take to Sacramento on Monday, and I would just again like to thank everyone here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Jose. I appreciate you. All right. So I'm very excited to introduce our next two speakers who are our experts on issues related to houselessness. Y'all know issues around economic justice and housing justice are huge all across the state. So I'm very excited for us to be talking about these two bills. So our next speakers are Eve Guerra who uses she, her pronouns, and Miss Peggy, who also uses she, her pronouns. Miss Peggy is a leader on several initiatives and a coalition working to decriminalize people who are unhoused. And thank you, next slide. Eve is a senior policy analyst and advocate at our sibling affiliate in ACLU SoCal. So I'm going to hand it off to y'all to tell us more about these issues. Thanks.
Miss Peggy, go for it.
My name is Miss Peggy Pleasant. I have lived experience as an unhoused person. In 2008, I was laid off my job, and after 22 years, and for the next 2 years, I spent all my savings and all my 401k just to survive for my daughter and myself. We eventually ended up moving out of our apartment and started to live in our car. We ate Chinese food almost every day, and my daughter still hates peanut butter and jelly. That went on for a while until finally I just had to bite the bullet because my car got repossessed and I didn't know what to do. I was starting to have mental health issues. I was starting to lose hope. never going to go back to work or whatever I did. But most of all, I just had no self-esteem. Having to let my daughter go live with her father was more than I could bear. I met a lady who introduced me to some mental health advocates and social workers. They provided me a referral to the downtown Skid Row area, and I moved in to a transitional housing for the first 19 days of being down there. I had gotten rid of everything that I owned, and I was relegated down to one suitcase. I was missing my daughter every day, but I was losing my hope every day. After transitioning to two other housing in the Skid Row area, SRO housing in the Skid Row area, I finally got into a program where they referred me to the Downtown Women's Center on 5th and San Pedro. And I was able to get my own apartment, or single apartment, with my own bathroom where I didn't have to share my own shower, and then my own kitchen, and I could cook for myself. But I was still without my daughter because they don't allow anyone to have to live with you in those facilities. Every day I would go out because I just couldn't be inside. It was just hard on me being inside without my family, of my own apartment. And every day I would walk past people who were coming to the Women's Center to get assistance, medical assistance, mental health assistance, just the simplest thing as food. And I'd pass these women, and I knew that I was no longer not one of them, even though I had housing. And my pain for them was that who will help them? Who will advocate for them? Who will assist them? I was able to get my medication on track, my mental health medication on track. I was able to even find a little part-time job while I was living there. But always I wanted two things: my daughter back and to see how I could help others. And as time went on, I decided after 4 years, I said, okay, let me move out of here so someone else can get this apartment, someone who needs to come off of these streets. And I moved to East LA, where I still live today, in affordable housing. I then set about to get involved in advocacy for the unhoused, especially for women and children. I'm not saying that men don't need assistance, but my passion is women and children, because I know what it is to not have your children live with you. I know what it is to not have a stable place, or have people in authority tell you you're not a good mother because you can't provide for your children. And I was in pain because these ladies needed help, and it didn't seem to be helping them. And this is how I got involved in advocacy for those who are unhoused. And this is why I speak for those who are unhoused. We have an opportunity to make change. As the young lady said earlier, we control what our representatives say for us. We control them, or they don't be in office. We need to make sure that we do what our jobs is, and that's to help someone else. We are not in this alone, and we can't do it alone. As Assembly Bryant and Assembly Haney have put forth these bills, ACA 10 and AB 920, we got to get on that bandwagon. We got to speak up. We got to advocate. I'm 71 years old, and I'm going to advocate for the next 29 years. By that time, I'm 100 and I need to retire again. So I'm just saying, we got to do this. We got to help those who don't know where to go and get help. Give them hope, give them housing, because housing is a human right. Thank you for letting me speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Peggy, and it's my privilege to be advocating alongside you, and with your lived expertise and your ability to speak truth to power. And I just like, if there's one, it's just like hard to follow Miss Peggy because her perspective is so powerful. But if there's one thing I would like, I hope you get, it's that houselessness is a policy choice. It was a policy choice we made as a nation back in the early 1980s when the Reagan administration almost completely gutted our subsidized affordable housing programs, the kinds of programs that Miss Peggy and the women and children that she advocates for now have benefited from, but after living for many, many years without housing. That is a policy choice. And we can undo that choice. Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can, absolutely. And I just also want to point out, there's a really strong intersection with our work advocating for housing justice and racial justice and disability rights justice and LGBTQ justice.
Yes.
Housing crisis affects everyone, it really does, but its effects are not equally felt. And Black people in particular in California are disproportionately impacted in part because of the, all of the different forms of discrimination that folks face in almost every aspect of life, which really, increases your housing insecurity and makes it more likely that folks are going to become unhoused. So the work we're doing is also racial justice work. We also know that once people become unhoused, and I know that Ms. Peggy has experienced this as well, they face additional forms of discrimination and civil rights violations simply because of your housing status. And here's a few examples that we hope that, if you're advocating for this or lobbying for this bill this week, and state legislators ask you discrimination based on housing status, well, like, what are you talking about? Well, it's just like, it's so prevalent in so many of our of our state funded policies. So take in-home supportive services. That's a state program that reimburses caretakers for taking care of either their loved ones or someone else. So you can get paid for doing caretaking. Well, unless you live in a tent or something like that. And then they don't consider that to be, a home, and you can't get reimbursed for that care that you're providing. And oftentimes these caretakers are unhoused themselves. I mean, I know one woman who's taking care of her dying partner. She left her job because she had to care for her dying partner. They live in a tent together, and she cannot get compensated for the dependent care that she's providing for him. And that's a form of discrimination. So, we need to fight discrimination, make sure that people, when they're unhoused, at least are getting the benefits and the resources that they need and they deserve, right? And are not being denied those opportunities simply because they're unhoused. And we also need to make sure that we just reverse this trend of, making it harder and harder for people to get housing, and ensure that everybody has the right to and the ability to access safe, permanent, affordable housing as an immediate response to their needs. Let's have the next slide. Next slide, please. So first, I guess I'll talk about AB 920, which is a very simple bill. This would address discrimination against unhoused people, what we were just talking about. California prohibits all kinds of discrimination based on race, on gender, on sexual orientation, on marital status, lots of different social categories. It does not prohibit discrimination based on housing status, i.e. discrimination against people who are unhoused. Adding two simple words, housing status, to our state's government code on that prohibits discrimination based on all of these different categories would prohibit discrimination against people who are unhoused. It would make it, right now, that is not recognized as actual discrimination under the law, even though it is. So this would make the lives of legal advocates much easier, because it would be easier to protect the rights of people who are currently being discriminated against. So the example I gave you of in-home supportive services is an example of a form of discrimination that could be challenged if this bill passes. Very, very important bill, because as anybody who's been unhoused can tell you, discrimination against unhoused people is actually rampant, and it just adds to the struggle that people are already facing when they're experiencing like such horrific material deprivation as Miss Peggy was describing. Let's go on to the next slide. The other bill, the flip side of this, is ACA 10. This bill, if it were to pass, would bring a new a bill or a new constitutional amendment to the voters, and the voters could decide whether to add the right to housing to California state constitution. It would create a constitutional amendment that acknowledges what is actually our human right to housing, but we just don't recognize that here in California. And guaranteeing the human right to housing would mean ensuring that all Californians have access to a home that is safe, that is permanent, that is habitable. The definition that we're using does not mean a mass shelter. It means housing that is affordable, that it is appropriate, that is like good, permanent housing. So this is another very, very important bill that we're advocating for, and we're very, very excited about it. So a little bit of yin and yang, a bill to prohibit discrimination, and then a bill to actually work towards a world in which everybody has what they need, not just to survive, but actually to thrive. How are we doing? We've got about a minute left, I think, of in our section. And I just like, Miss Peggy and I were talking about this earlier. Miss Peggy, in just 1 minute, you also, because I would just want to mention this, because a lot of policymakers and public officials conflate shelter and housing as if they're the same thing. And nothing could be farther from the truth. So do you just want to say a few words about the difference between an actual home and a mass shelter, and why we're fighting for the right to housing and not the right to shelter?
When you enter in a shelter, thank you, Eve, I appreciate you asking this question of me. When you enter in a shelter, there may be 30 or 40 people in one room. You're on a cot, you don't have your children, you don't have, and then they'll tell you in the morning around 6 or 7, you need to get out because you're gonna be, we're closing the building. You can no longer sleep here. You have to go somewhere. Well, if you're homeless or you are unhoused, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning is a good idea if you're going to a job or something. But if you got to get up and go walk around, or maybe try to find something to do for the day, and then be back by 3 o'clock just so you can get in line and get a number, so maybe you can get back in there and sleep that night. There's violence in those shelters. There's theft in those shelters. It is not a safe place. And even if you go in there with your children, it's not a safe place. Now, if you got your own apartment, even if it's a single apartment, you have an opportunity to lock out the ugliness of the world. But I wouldn't recommend a shelter for anybody.
Mhm.
I see why many people still sleep on the streets is because shelters are scary places. The staffs are not always nice to you. If you ask too many questions, you can be told to roll up and get out. It happened to me the first 19 days I was downtown. I couldn't sleep for 19 days. And when I finally went to sleep, I was 15 minutes late to an appointment with the lady who was going to set my program, my case manager. When I showed up, she told me, "Get your stuff together, you're leaving." And I'm like, "Why am I leaving?" She said, "Because you don't know how to get here on time." And I
And
was
that's the way they treated you.
very sad. It was heart-rending because it just put one more nail into my hope. It put one more nail into my self-esteem. So I can imagine if it hurt me, and I was in my 50s, what about the other people that come through there? People who have been on the streets all their lives, all their adult lives. Because everybody that's on the street is not a drug addict or an alcoholic.
Yeah.
They may have had some reverses of fortune, like I did. But when you treat them subhuman, or you don't treat them like they're a person that needs assistance or help, you tear them down little by little. You tear them down. You cause their hope to go. And it takes all it is to climb back up out of that pit that you just nailed another nail into their coffin. We need these bills. We need to work this program till we can't work no more, because there's more and more people coming onto the streets.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, don't let me go too
Oh,
far.
no, that's, I just, I just like want to close this out, I guess, by saying, such a privilege to work with you, Miss Peggy. And it's always been my firm belief that our advocacy, and this is actually the case with these bills, but that our advocacy needs to be led by the expertise and the interests and the voices of the people who are most impacted, the survivors of our unequal, violent, and unjust system, because they know the truth about our system, and what works and what doesn't, and what's humane and what isn't. So thank you so much, Miss Peggy, and again, just an honor and a privilege to work with you and to be with all of you tonight. And thank you all also for those of you who are going to be advocating for these bills.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. And I just want to echo what everyone's been saying in the chat and share like a huge gratitude to Miss Peggy for sharing your testimony and your power. And this is, as you've said, such an important issue. And I think we're all really thankful and enthusiastic for the opportunity to support housing justice. So with that, I'm gonna pivot us to our Senate bill. And not everyone is meeting with the senator, but if you are, we are asking you to focus on this bill, and that is SB 852. And let's go to the next slide, please. SB 852 by Senator Susan Rubio would prohibit ICE officers from impersonating probation officers. And to tell us about it is our own Luis Nolasco, Senior Policy Advocate and Organizer with ACLU of Southern California and Statewide Immigrant Rights Team Co-Lead. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll let Luis tell us why SB 852 is so important, please.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, couldn't unmute myself. Hey, everybody. Good evening. My name is Luis Nolasco. I use he, him pronouns. As Gabby mentioned, I'm a senior policy advocate and organizer for our SoCal office based out of the IE. 909 represent. And I am also the statewide immigrant rights team co-lead. So can you go to the next? So I'll be talking about SB 852 by Senator Rubio, Stop ICE Probation Tricks. And so to give a little bit of context to the reason why we even are proposing this bill and taking this to the legislature is to share a little bit about the ongoing ICE practices that have happened in our country, particularly California, for a long time. We have documented stories where ICE officers, in order to sort of go around the Fourth Amendment, right, and to go around the requirement for warrants to search homes and, you know, to arrest people, they adopted this practice of impersonating police officers. So the moment that they would show up looking for someone, they wouldn't identify themselves as ICE. They would say, "Hello, I'm looking for Luis Nolasco. Is this this is you know, a police officer here for to check your registration on your car." This was an ongoing practice that the ACLU luckily brought litigation on to sort of, you know, end this practice of false impersonation of police officers. However, we did know that unfortunately there is a lot of ambiguity in the law, right, about what who is a law enforcement officer, peace officer. And so this bill, in a sense, is to try to patch up some of the ongoing existing law in California to not allow people that are on probation to fall under the same fate. So ICE officers commonly present themselves as probation officers and claim they're conducting probation checks. So unlike police officers, for people that are on probation, they have a set guidelines when they are released on probation that they have to comply with, which means that anytime a probation officer comes to your home, you have to let them in, right? And so for a lot of people that are on probation, when they hear probation, it's your probation officer's probation at your door, they're automatically going to open the door. And what we've seen is that automatically when the person opens the door, you know, they are arresting the person inside. So really this bill is to stop these unlawful ruse tactics that have allowed ICE to diminish the rights of individuals that are on probation. Can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, next slide. Oh, thank you. So yeah, like I mentioned, this aims to clear up the ambiguity between law enforcement officer and peace officer regarding probation. So probation sort of like fell in the middle there. We have already passed laws in California that make it clear that police, that, you know, the statute is clarified around police. We haven't clarified it on probation, so that's what this bill is trying to do. It will protect our communities, particularly the Latinx community, who we've seen has been disproportionately targeted by these enforcement practices. And just to share a little bit of data, this is from like what we've seen, right, from our litigation and from this work that we've tracked throughout the state. From 2014 to 2021, the LA ICE field office, so they cover pretty much a good chunk of Southern California, so it's 7 counties or so, they conducted at least 19,000 at-large arrests. A good majority of these arrests happen at people's homes, at their residence, right? We don't have the actual numbers of how many of these were for false impersonation of probation, but we know that this is an ongoing issue that we must stop now. So California has already very made clear, right, that we are a state that welcomes immigrants. And so this is just an addition to the ongoing values that we have as Californians. And next. And then just going to end it here with just some shameless plugins in case people want more information. This is it should be live still. If not, we can share more at Lobby Day, but this is just sort of the ongoing educational piece that we've done around these practices of false impersonation. ICENotWelcome.org. This is a page that we created to educate our community about these false impersonation of ICE pretending to be police on probation. But really just want to hone it in that, you know, we're hoping to fix the probation piece with this bill by Senator Rubio. And I believe this is being heard in its first committee, April 26th. So you all are going at the perfect time. You're going to hit all these senators like right before the first committee. So couldn't have asked for a better timing and sense for our bill. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much for that, Luis. I just have to say that I can't believe we're still dealing with this in 2023, but I'm thankful for everyone that's going to be joining us and rallying with us to support this important Senate bill. And we heard so much great information. So we want to take a few minutes now. If we can go to the next slide, we're going to take some questions before we move on. So if you do have questions, please drop them in the chat, or actually just please drop them in the chat and we'll take care of those. And I'm just going to go ahead and start selecting some questions that our team has been tracking. Thank you, everyone. And I'll try to direct it at the correct person, but others, please feel free to jump in. This is a general question, so probably for Carmen, is will we be meeting, oh no, maybe not for Carmen, but will we be meeting each of our assembly member and senators, or will it be with folks in their offices?
Good evening. I'm happy to jump in on that question. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanisha. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the grassroots advocacy manager in Northern California. So we sent meeting invites. We requested meetings with your senator and assembly members. We tried to get meetings with the senators and assembly members themselves, but they might be in the middle of session or something like that. So we might be meeting with representatives, people from their office. And it's going to depend if you are meeting with a senator, an assembly member, or both. Will depend on who you are. If you are in Northern California, the meeting list, sort of tentative meeting list has been posted. We know that things are going to change between now and Monday, but if you're in Northern California, you can already take a look at the offices that you're meeting with in those times. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tanisha. And then I have another, this is probably more for Carmen. A couple process questions is, will bills only travel through one committee? And I can actually answer that one. And the answer is not always. Sometimes they will travel through a couple of committees or various committees, depending on what that lobby or what that bill needs. This one actually is probably more for Carmen. And the question is, who decides what policy committee handles a particular bill?
If Carmen's not here, I can take this question. So usually a bill goes through the Rules Committee, where it's assigned a committee based on what the bill touches on. But also, in some cases, a committee itself could pull a bill into its committee if they think it's relevant to their jurisdiction. And that does happen.
Thank you, Jose. And this one is about AB 742. And good question is there any data or statistics about how inhumane it is to use dogs in police departments? I'm not sure if Lizzie is
Yeah. Hey, I'll jump in here to say that we do have a number of statistics that we are holding up and encourage people to mention during your lobby visits. So we posted the link to the fact sheets and talking points for that bill that includes a number of great statistics as well as information on our California Action website. So we definitely have some statistics, and we've picked a few that we think are going to be the most relevant that speak, for example, to the racial justice dynamics of the bill and some of the opposition messaging that we're hearing around the ideas that, you know, police dogs lead to less violence. So we have some statistics and some points for you to refute that point in particular.
Thank you so much for that, Tanisha. I think some folks may have stepped away, so I'm going to skip over to some housing related questions if Eve is still on the line. Really good question about AB 920 is, would this also make housing status a protected class for purposes of protection from employment discrimination? Would AB 920 prevent employment hiring discrimination?
That is a good question, and the answer is it depends. So this bill is part of like our government code 11135, and what that does is it prohibits discrimination by any state agency, which is why I mentioned in-home supportive services as an example, because that's a state agency. So it's prohibited from, it would be prohibited from discriminating against people who are unhoused, or state-funded agency. So any state or state-funded agency, and there's a lot of state-funded agencies that aren't state agencies themselves, or programs, state-funded programs that discriminated in hiring based on housing status would be considered to, would fall under this, this bill and this law if it were passed. So, but unfortunately, it doesn't touch the private sector unless those private sector establishments for whatever reason receive state funding.
Okay, and I have one more for you, Eve. It's this is also a really good question. Have other states added the right to housing to their constitution? And are there other, what are the organizations that are co-sponsoring or supporting these bills?
Both bills or ACA 10?
I'm not sure, but let's focus on ACA 10.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a not complete overlap, but a lot of overlap anyway. So the organizations that are the co-sponsors are ACE, Housing Now, the ACLU Southern, the ACE, ACLU Cal Action. Let me think. There's more. There's several. I'll look them up and I'll put them in the chat. How about that? Because I know I'm forgetting a few. The bill also just has like a ton of co-sponsors. We're just like racking up co-sponsors like there's no tomorrow, which is nice. Because I will tell you, this bill, this is like a heavy lift. And so it's just good to get that kind of validation and affirmation. A Western Center on Law and Poverty is another organization that's co-sponsoring this bill. So it's like organizations that are really grounded in economic justice and tenants' rights and housing justice, and advocating for the rights of people who are unhoused.
Awesome, thank you, Eve. I think that is it for now, but I'll keep track of any other questions that come up. And I believe that when we share the packets with folks, we will include on there some of the co-sponsor information as well. So, and it might be available online also on our online bill resources. Okay, so I'm gonna pivot a little bit now to back to AB 793, the reverse warrants bill. You don't have to follow on the slideshow, Ermelinda. You could just leave it on the Q&A slide. Becca, are you with us?
She might be muted. Well, yeah. Okay, there we go.
Holler if you hear me. Did someone manage to?
Yes, I am here. Thank you for letting me unmute.
Hi, Becca. So
Hello.
we have some great questions on AB 793. So thank you so much for joining us. The first question is did I hear correctly that there's no check on these requests as there is with a typical warrant process, which I understand requires a judge's signature?
So and if they're going through, if law enforcement is seeking a warrant, then there are some checks. But what we have found is sometimes those are not enough, although several times now courts have found these reverse demands to be unconstitutional. Our bill applies not just to warrants, but also to subpoenas that may or may not ever go before a judge, as well as informal requests or law enforcement asking someone else to run the to get the information for them, or even buying the information from data brokers. And so there are information without ever going before a judge, and this bill would also cover those situations.
Those are really important distinctions. Becca, we're losing your audio a little bit. It's cutting in and out. I'm not sure if you might need to shift where you're sitting a little, but hopefully you'll be able to hang with us because we have a couple other questions on this one. And Tanisha, do please let me know how I'm doing on time. The next question is, are there recent examples of reverse warrants being used in California?
I don't know of any publicized recent examples. There's a lot of unknowns about reverse warrants. So we do know from data from Google that between 2018 and 2020, the number of reverse warrants for reverse geofence warrants, several hundred a year to 2,000 a year. We do not have any information about reverse keyword searches and how often those are being used in California, unfortunately. So we don't have any big profile examples, or even necessarily examples where it's been publicized. We do know in other places reverse demands have been used, for example, to get information about people protesting police violence in other states.
Got it. So it sounds like something we're trying to be proactive on, given that we are seeing this in other places. Great. And then one more question, Becca, is the goal of passing AB 793 to protect Californians or out-of-state people seeking abortion or gender-affirming care, or both?
It's both. So it would protect everyone who is, so I will turn off my video is off. Okay. So if it would apply to any geofence warrant for a location in California, as well as any keyword search that has a tie to California. So for example, abortion providers in California, if you Googled that, that would be covered under the bill if the request went to a Google office in California.
Awesome. Thank you, Becca. And so I think that was all the questions, well, I have one more question actually that came through for AB 793, and would it also cover like other incriminating searches, like online searches? I guess in other words, what, like somebody used the example of
People
like
might be searching.
Oh, go ahead, Becca. Okay, I think Becca might have dropped off on us.
Are you still, can you hear me now?
Oh, yep, I can hear you.
Sorry, my internet has been doing this all day, no matter where I am, or if I'm on my try and log in cell phone. So I apologize for the issue. One is there could be any
we might be able to answer on her behalf. What was the question?
Oh, is this Carlos to the rescue?
I don't know yet.
The question was for AB 793 is would it be broad and cover other searches that are not related to reproductive care that may also be incriminating, like how to make drugs, how to make weapons, etc.?
Yes, it is. I think what we were hoping to do with this bill is, because of the climate that we're in nationally and the threat that we're facing, in other states with regard to gender affirming care and reproductive health care. We wanted to make sure rhetorically to focus the urgency of these reverse demands on the dangers that they pose to people seeking gender affirming care and reproductive health care. But yes, they can be more broadly applied. And so we're excited about that. I don't know that we want to talk broadly about all the ways in which we're limiting law enforcement in terms of reverse demands, but to your question, yes, that's accurate.
Great, thank you, Carlos.
Oops, Gab, you muted.
Thank you. I think that was most of the questions for AB 793. Thank you, Carlos. So we did have a couple for AB 742. Is Lizzie still with us?
I'm on. I can answer questions on behalf of AB 742.
Okay, perfect. So the first question is there any data or statistics about how inhumane it is to use dogs in police departments? Lizzie shared some stories, but do we have numbers to back that up?
Yes. So I believe that dogs are usually retired after 5 to 7 years. But ultimately, when dogs aren't placed in a home after they are serving in the police force, we don't know what happens to those dogs. And so those dogs could potentially, be left without a home and even, euthanized. We actually think that keeping dogs in the force and proliferating the use of dogs in law enforcement puts them at greater risk than limiting the use of dogs to crowd control. To search and rescue and the detection of drugs. And we also know anecdotally what we've seen is several instances where dogs have been overheated and have died overheating in vehicles, and are not necessarily really the treatment of these dogs depends on the level of resources that the police department has to care for those dogs. So we do think that if you want to talk about the issue from the perspective of humane treatment of animals, there is an angle there.
Got it. Thank you. And then the next question is, are there any other states that have banned the use of dogs or have looked at banning the use of dogs?
We don't have any state or federal standard that governs the use of police dogs.
Got it. And then the other question is, what is the opposition to this bill? What does that look like?
Our opponents, largely law enforcement, are saying that dogs are a really important tool to public safety because they allow police officers to have an alternative to the use of lethal force. It's a little insulting, but basically what they're saying is if you don't want us to shoot people, let's allow the use of these dogs to potentially maim and disfigure them or even kill them. But we know that the de-escalation argument doesn't bear out based on the data. When we looked at police departments that actually have dogs and police departments that do not use dogs, there's no increase in the use of lethal force among departments that do not have dogs. So that would suggest that dogs aren't actually contributing to a decrease in the use of lethal force or an increase in the use of lethal force. And what we also have seen is that because of the panic that ensues when someone is being bitten or attacked by a dog, the interaction itself is escalatory. And so when the police officer might perceive that as the person is trying to fend off the dog for their own safety, and the police officer might perceive that the person is then putting the dog at risk, the police officer then might be inclined to shoot the person. So we do not buy the argument that dogs are a de-escalating alternative to the use of lethal force. And I would both go back to the data around comparing police departments that use dogs and don't use dogs, and there not being a difference in terms of the use of lethal force, and also the fact that police officers are going to be inclined to protect those dogs when if they had to choose between the dog and the person that the dog is attacking.
Thank you for that, Carlos. So we also had a couple of questions for SB 852. I think we have just a couple minutes left here. So Carlos or Luis Nolasco, if either of you want to chime in, is the first question is, will SB 852 apply to parole officers as well?
So we already have, I don't know, Luis, do you want me to answer, or do you want to answer?
Go for it.
So we already have I think the good thing about what we're trying to do is we see AB 52 as a fairly common sense narrow fix, because we already prohibit these types of searches by ICE when it comes to formerly incarcerated people on parole. So what we're only trying to do is to conform the same definition of who is and isn't allowed to engage in these searches for people who are on probation. And so the bill is really based on the previous law that was passed related to parole. So parolees are already protected from these unlawful searches by ICE.
Great. And then I'm just going to throw out one more question that's a little bit more technical, but you probably can answer this. Does this require a 2/3 vote to have an exclusionary effect in California state courts because of the truth in evidence law?
And what to the what bill?
For SB 852, sorry.
Oh, no, it doesn't require a 2/3 vote. But Luis, do you want to talk a little more about the truth and evidence piece?
I actually don't know much about that, so we might have to get you back on that.
Carmen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the truth and evidence law comes from Proposition 115, and it basically says that all relevant evidence will be admissible, so long as it is not otherwise excluded under the federal law, which of course is then based largely on interpretation of our federal Constitution. So in order to meet the barrier that the truth and evidence law sets, any bill would have to have a 2/3 vote. That is a supermajority of the legislature, in order to overcome Proposition 115, which says relevant evidence comes in. And the purpose of that at the time was to make sure that cases weren't failing as a consequence of technicalities or misconduct by the cops. Of course, what that means in effect is there's not a real deterrent effect in a lot of cases for cops to actually comply with your constitutional rights, because from their perspective, if I find the evidence is coming in. Hopefully that's responsive.
Thank you, Carmen. And I think that about does it for us with questions. I saw one very important one that I happened to catch in the chat, which was someone asking, who will we meet with? What legislators? Do we just meet with anybody? No, that will be assigned to you. So please stay tuned for your lobby meeting assignments, okay? And you will get that from your staff liaison. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Raquel, who is going to bring us through a reflection.
Whew. Thank you all. Wow. So much great information, a lot of really great questions. Y'all are hella funny too. I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you. I just want to take 5 minutes. If you need to get a drink of water, if you need to take a stretch, please do that during this time. Otherwise, I'd love for folks to share, write down some reflections. I know we've been adding this a bit. But yeah, just it's 7:35 right now. Just take 5 minutes, absorb the things that came in. Maybe we'll put the music back on. And then we'll come back at 7:40 and finish out. We really just have like 10 to 15 minutes left. So I promise we'll have you out before 8. And big shout out to Ermelinda for this playlist. It's fire. Really appreciate you. And yeah, thank you everybody for sharing your reflections in the chat. I like just a little shaking out too. Yeah, just keep energy moving and emotions moving. And yeah, y'all have me feeling in my feelings, real emotional, talking about, coming back after, since the pandemic. Elizabeth, you saying this is your 4th or 5th lobby day, but the first one back since the pandemic. And I really appreciated you sharing how excited you're feeling, and as well as with Madeline and others. So, yes, we will be sharing the slides from tonight. We can actually make them available now, but we'll be sending them out to everybody. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what's next? Well, don't worry if you did not have your questions answered tonight. There's still time. There's a lot that we're gonna be able to talk about in our groups. We're gonna be able to practice, and you're gonna have some time to talk with folks. Next slide. Awesome, thanks for posting those in the chat, Tanisha. Okay, resources. So we've put all the resources together for you in one place, so it's really easy to access. We also encourage you to do your own research. We've given you a lot of information. We're not the only ones working on this. There's a lot of information out in the interwebs. I encourage you to find what resources you can, but the ones that we've made available to you, we ask that you review them by Monday. That includes fact sheets and talking points for each bill, a sample lobby visit script, our ACLU legislator scorecard to learn more about the legislator that you're meeting with, and tonight's slides. I'll also add that for anyone who lives in the NorCal region, your lobby liaison will be contacting you tomorrow, Thursday, to answer any questions that you have, confirm all the details, really just have a good one-to-one about all the things related to lobby visits. So I know there's a lot of spammers out there, but if you get a call from ACLU of Northern California, or maybe a number that you don't recognize tomorrow, answer it. Thanks. Next slide. Okay, so lobby day is happening Monday. It's this Monday, this upcoming Monday, the 24th. Registration and breakfast will be available starting at 8:30 a.m. Then at 10 a.m., we'll go over what to expect during your lobby visit. After that, you'll have a chance to actually practice with your team. So you'll be sitting with your teammates, like I was talking about, time for intergenerational wisdom, sharing what you know, what you've learned, what you've been processing over these past few days. It will all come together for these moments. It's very exciting. After that, we'll move to a press conference where we will hear from the actual authors of the bills and then lobby at the Capitol. It's going to be very cool. It's going to be very fun. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Do we need to be there right at 8:30 or just in time to? I need to see. Sorry, hold on. Okay, it went away. Sorry. Yeah, just in time to register it at 10, but you know, if you want to have breakfast, if you want to like move slow in the morning, get some coffee, like you can come earlier. Next slide. Okay, some things to keep in mind. Attire. We will provide you with an ACLU lobby day shirt to wear. I think it looks pretty cool when we're all, you know, matching. But you want to wear comfortable shoes as there will be a bit of walking and standing. Maybe someone from Sacramento can let us know what the weather's been like. I know in Oakland here it's been pretty sunny but windy. So I would just, you know, dress for, okay, it's gonna be hot. Oh, it will be warm around 80s. Okay, it's gonna be hot, y'all. So prep for that. There's also trees around, so we can, you know, find some shade. I'm gonna bring a picnic blanket, you know, we'll stay cool. You will have to go through metal detectors in the Capitol in order to get to the lobby visit. So something to keep in mind, you know, sometimes, you know, if you're planning on going like camping or anything, bring like metal utensils or anything like that. Just make sure you check your bag before you enter the building. You want to bring your water bottle. I highly encourage you to bring a water bottle to have with you at all times. If you're staying at the Holiday Inn for the conference, you want to check out of your room before you join the lobby day training, and your luggage storage will be available at the hotel. What time is check-in on Saturday? I believe it's after 3. Next slide. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. We did it. Thank you so much. You've been lovely participants. I look forward to seeing you all this weekend, and on Monday, I'm gonna look through the chat one more time to see if there's any last minute questions, but otherwise, thank you so much. Yeah, looks good. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Y'all in Sacramento on Monday.
Yeah, we'll see you Monday. Woo! Lobby teams. We lobby teams. Thanks, everybody. Good night. Bye.